In other news this evening, a source has reportedly told CNN the Trump administration is considering sending ground troops into Syria. For more on whether the proposal has any substance or is one more reason the president is referring to the mainstream media as fake news, we're joined tonight by John Tillerson, is a global risk analyst and foreign policy principal at Trilogy Advisors. Nice to have you with us, John. What do you make of this report? Let's just say that it is verified and that there is some conversation about troops in Syria. We can quickly point out that this is something the president did not talk about on the campaign trail, and this would certainly change the dynamic with a number of different countries if the United States injected itself into Syria at a different level. What do you make of all of this?
You raise a lot of very important points, Ed, but I do have to take this as a somewhat dubious claim right now. There's been no validation of this report over the last 48 hours. And of course, the Secretary of Defense is in Europe telling not just NATO, but the world that there really isn't room for U.S.-Russia military cooperation at this time. And there are no ground troops to be brought into Syria when Russia controls all of the airspace in Syria and Iran essentially controls all of the ground troop movements with its own Shia militia and Hezbollah troops. So I find it very difficult to envision a massive infusion of ground troops. But having said that, Ed, keep in mind the U.S. does have about 40 special operations forces in the country, and they're helping out the anti-Assad forces that the U.S. has chosen to work with. There are about 5,000 troops in Iraq. They're in much more intensive combat-type operations. But perhaps there's going to be an expansion of the special operations forces in Syria. But I really cannot imagine any massive infusion of quote-unquote boots on the ground in Syria anytime in the imminent future.
And the scenario that you've played out, the dynamic of the air superiority right now and also in who is doing the fighting on the ground, we really don't even have a clarification of where the Trump administration wants to go with Assad. So if injecting troops into this would create more problems than it would solve, at least in the first month or so, wouldn't it?
I agree. But there is one thing, there's a political dynamic that I think is important to include here. Trump is trying his very best, whether one voted for him or not, to carry out his campaign promises. And one campaign promise that was his #1 priority in terms of national security was the defeat of the Islamic State. But he never came up with a plan to do it himself, nor would anyone, I think, realistically expect him to as a businessman. But he did say, and he has given the orders to Secretary of Defense Mattis, to have the military put together a plan that is credible, that can achieve the end outcome that President Trump is seeking here. And the details remain to be seen. I just find it odd that there'd be a leak right now about ground troops into a very untenable situation where not only Shia troops and Hezbollah troops, but also Turkish troops are there, making sure that the Kurds don't achieve any autonomy in northeastern Syria. And al-Qaeda is actually waiting in the wings for the defeat of the Islamic State so they can take over that element of the radical Sunni movement in Syria. So it's just a very convoluted array of forces, and I don't see any clean way for a massive infusion of American combat troops into Syria anytime in the near future.
John Tillerson, Trilogy Advisors, nice to have you with us tonight. Thanks so much for joining us.
Russia's Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov is speaking after his first meeting with the new U.S. Secretary of State Rex Tillerson. Let's listen.
Syria and other countries of the region where terrorism has rooted in. We discussed also the situation in Afghanistan and in Ukraine. On all these tracks, our American partners are ready to join in the efforts which are being applied to overcome these conflicts. And as soon as the team and the State Department and other agencies would be completely formed and completed, we will be willing to start working on all those matters. It is easily understood that we can't solve all the problems, and problems can never be solved between such two great powers as the United States and the Russian Federation. But where it is possible to find common ground, we should find it. We should move, we should progress further, and we, the two countries, can play the roles which we should occupy in the world. We have touched upon the bilateral relations, which have been undermined severely by the Obama administration, especially in its last months. Tillerson reaffirmed the commitment of Donald Trump and his team to overcome the crisis in relations, to remove all the artificial barriers on the track of developing our relation. But of course, we understand that there are always matters to discuss, to debate over, and all the differences cannot be solved during one meeting. We have agreed that we'll continue our contacts, our dialogue. We'll have many opportunities in the upcoming months, and we will proceed from the assumption that when the presidents think it is possible, then there will be a meeting between President Putin and President Trump, and I'm ready to take up your questions. No, we did not discuss sanctions. We did not discuss sanctions at all. We believe that that is an anomaly, it is not normal, and those who indulge in sanctioning, that they should be asking themselves the question whether it is efficient and effective, whether it is the normal kind of dialogue between the countries, and how artificial it is to politicize certain matters, just trying to achieve your own interests.
Do you assess the recent negotiations in Astana?
Yes, he expressed his willingness to support that track of work. As you know, American ambassador was there as an observer in January, and during today's meeting we have invited a broader group to participate, and they said that during the times when the administration is not yet formed and the State Department is not yet formed, they would rather send their ambassador to Kazakhstan to participate in the Astana meeting in January and today.
What's your first impression of the meeting?
I just said that I have never met him before, so that is why I said that this meeting was very pragmatic, very fruitful, and I think useful. Thank you.
The House has confirmed President Trump's national security advisor, Michael Flynn, has resigned from his post after less than 1 month in office. Gayane Chichikan has the latest from Washington.
All of this started with anonymous officials telling the media that Michael Flynn had discussed the Obama administration sanctions against Russia with the Russian ambassador to the U.S. weeks before Trump took office. What exactly the two men said to each other, we the public still don't know. Initially, when asked, Flynn said that the phone calls were not about sanctions. Vice President Mike Pence and other administration officials reiterated Flynn's account. General Flynn then came back to the media to say he wasn't certain. Tonight, he wrote this.
In the course of my duties as the incoming National Security Advisor, I held numerous phone calls with foreign counterparts, ministers and ambassadors. These calls were to facilitate a smooth transition and to begin to build the necessary relationships between the president, his advisors and foreign leaders. Such calls are standard practice in any transition of this magnitude. Unfortunately, because of the fast pace of events, I inadvertently briefed the Vice President-elect and others with the incomplete information regarding my phone calls with the Russian ambassador. I have sincerely apologized to the President and the Vice President, and they've accepted my apology.
Over the past several weeks, Trump's now former national security advisor has been under tremendous pressure from the press and from Trump's opposition, many of whom were desperately looking to find a connection between the Trump administration and the Russian government.
Tonight, confirmation that President-elect Trump's national security advisor, General Michael Flynn, was in contact with the Russian ambassador to the U.S.
U.S. investigators are scrutinizing late December phone calls between Mike Flynn, President Donald Trump's national security advisor, and Russia's ambassador to the U.S.
Trump's national security advisor could be in trouble over a phone call he made before he was on the White House payroll.
Anonymous sources telling the paper that U.S. counterintelligence agents are looking into communications Flynn is said to have had with Russian officials.
There was, figuratively speaking, a target on General Flynn's back way before the phone calls happened. Before Trump was elected, the former head of the Defense Intelligence Agency was blasted in the U.S. media for his appearance on our channel, where he discussed the fight against ISIL. He was blasted for accepting an invitation to RT's anniversary gala in Moscow, where the Russian president was also a guest. Add to that Flynn's apparently not seeing Russia as an enemy and his perceived amicable attitude toward Russia, and you could see how he became the target of many speculations here.
Meanwhile, following media reports of Flynn's alleged connections to Russian officials, the hashtag #FireFlynn has been trending on social media, with people backing his resignation. We heard from several experts who believe there would have been attempts to sweep Flynn to the side no matter what over his bid to improve ties with Moscow.
It was the Democrat Party mantra under Hillary Clinton during the election cycle that in which she was very anti-Russian in tone. The fact that a high official of the Trump administration was even talking to the Russians or even wanting to improve relations with the Russians. The fact that the general had paid a visit to the RT anniversary meeting and publicly had met Mr. Putin just gave them more fuel for their fire.
They would still keep going after Flynn because our media is obsessed with Russia and obsessed with tying everybody to Russia that they can possibly tie to Russia. Everybody in America who thinks that it would be a bad idea for America and Russia to go to war together, the media wants to accuse of somehow being a Russian agent. So anybody who talks to Russia at all, for any reason at all, they're going to accuse of having some kind of ties. So it didn't matter what Flynn said. The media would keep going after him.
All right, RT's Kate Partridge now joining me live in the studio for more on this top story here, Kate. Some are saying that if you have any association with anything Russia, then typically you're a bad guy.
Yes, indeed, Rory. Here we go again. Yes, it does seem that the mention of Russia, the traditional bogeyman, is enough to prompt a bit of hysteria. The hashtag #FireFlynn has leapt up on Twitter with a damning comment coming from US Democratic leader Nancy Pelosi.
Now we have a national security advisor who cannot be trusted not to put Putin before America. As long as Republicans refuse to compel the release of President Trump's tax returns, they are complicit in covering up Russia's financial, personal, and political hold on the administration. Vladimir Putin's grip on President Trump must be investigated, exposed, and broken. National security demands that General Flynn be fired immediately.
Yes, Putin before America, Russia's financial, personal and political hold, Putin's grip on President Trump. Well, his notion that cooperation with Russia is a good thing hasn't met much wider appreciation.
Well, I respect a lot of people, but that doesn't mean I'm going to get along with him. He's a leader of his country. I say it's better to get along with Russia than not. And if Russia helps us in the fight against ISIS, which is a major fight, and Islamic terrorism all over the world, right. Major fight, that's a good thing. Will I get along with him? I have no idea. It's very
He's a
possible
killer,
I
though.
won't.
Putin's a killer.
A lot of killers. We got a lot of killers. Why, you think our country's so innocent?
Well, extraordinary criticism and pressure on an administration that's less than 4 weeks old. And it's not just the Democrats and the media who are so fearful of Russia.
I would consider the principal threats to start with Russia.
Russia today poses a danger.
Russia has reasserted itself aggressively.
While other European countries who think an olive branch from the West to the Kremlin is the way forward, they're treated sceptically by the mainstream media.
You who talk so profoundly about valuing the sovereignty of France surely must have a view on the violation of the sovereignty of Ukraine and the annexation of Crimea.
There was a coup d'etat in Ukraine.
That's what you think?
Yes, it's not just my opinion, that's just the reality. There was a referendum in Crimea.
After the invasion and the annexation. Yes.
There has never been an invasion of Crimea.
Well, perhaps after the latest sensation to rock the new Trump regime has calmed down, open diplomacy between West and East might be less of a scary prospect.
All right, RT's Kate Partridge, thank you.